Hey, it's Campbell from WooCommerce. Today we're going to go through the quick start guide for taking your WooCommerce store headless using the WooCommerce platform. There's 5 things that we're going to cover, actually 4 things we're going to cover as we work through this quick start. The quick start guide covers 5 things, but we're going to skip one of the steps. All right, so first off, we're going to set up Typesense. Typesense is a high-performance search, open source search tool that basically powers the search, the filtering, and so forth on the front end. But it also is the data store for all of your product data, categories, and so forth as a site is being deployed using headless. We're going to then install WooCommerce and all the dependent plugins required for GraphQL and a few other bits and pieces, and then configure that plugin. And then lastly, we're going to deploy it on Vercel. All right, we're going to skip the deployment locally. All right, so a couple of things that we require in order to do this. We've got to have a GitHub account, a free Vercel account. They've got what's called a hobby plan, which is free. And then also a 14-day free trial with Typesense. All right, so one of the things that I just want to mention up front is that we use a subdomain for checking out with our headless platform. Right? So when a user goes to check out, they're actually checking out on WordPress WooCommerce. Right? So everything on the front end, the homepage, product pages, category pages, search, all that sort of interaction with discovering products, adding them to the cart, even the mini cart is all headless. Once they go to the checkout, it's going to a subdomain. The reason we've done that is that there was just so much work to take the front end functions of WordPress WooCommerce headless that we decided to leave the checkout, which in itself is a massive project. You've got payment options, you've got shipping, you've got the ability to tailor the checkout, custom fields, a whole lot of different things, right? So we're leaving that as stage 2, which we plan to deliver early in 2025. So for now, what I'm going to show you today is configuring WordPress and WooCommerce as a subdomain, and also using the primary domain for deploying the front end. So I just want to get that clear up front. All right, so the first thing we need to do is set up a Typesense instance. Right, so I've already got a Typesense account, a free account that I've signed up for, and I've already deployed a cluster because it takes about 4 minutes to deploy it. And rather than sit here waiting for that to happen, it's a very simple process to create a cluster. You choose the region you want. The rest you just leave default and you hit launch. Right? And then once you've got that cluster, you can generate API keys. And in doing so, it will download a text file that will have 2 API keys in it. Right, so I'm just going to go back to the quick start guide. Right, so this steps you through it all if you're unsure, but you will end up with an API key. And the API key is used to create indexes, to upload data, to update the indexes on an ongoing basis. So it's a write capability as well as a read. The search only API key is what's used on the front end to query the search engines, right? And then node is basically a Typesense URL for accessing the index. Right? So you'll get those 3 pieces of information when you generate the API keys. There is an option also to install Typesense locally as an open source project, or deploying it on a VPS, VPS, yeah. But I'm not going to cover that in this tutorial. All right, so the next thing we need to do is install the theme and the plugins necessary for WooCommerce to communicate with Typesense and to communicate with the headless front end. Right? First off, I've got a clean instance of WordPress here. Right? So fresh instance, and I've imported a whole lot of products using an open source sample database. So I've got a couple of 100 products in here already. And the only other thing I've done is I have added a theme, right, which is the Generate Press theme. That's the one we've developed against up to this point. In the next month or so, we're going to be switching to using a a blocks theme, site editing theme, 2024 in fact, so that the entire configuration of the site can be done in blocks, the product page, category pages, homepage, all that sort of thing. But for now, it's Generate Press. And the one customization I've made to that is I've added a site logo. So if we go to the plugins, I've already uploaded all of the necessary dependent plugins. I haven't added the WooCommerce plugin yet, but I just want to mention that when you're installing these dependent plugins, and we're going to configure some of these in a moment when I activate them, but when they're installed initially, most of these are downloaded from a GitHub repository, and when you install them, it appends the version number to the folder names. So you have to go through and actually edit the folder names and remove those version numbers. Right? And I've done that already. All right, so let's go ahead and activate all of these plugins. We can do it in bulk. While that's happening, one of the first things we need to do is we've got to configure the GraphQL cross-origin plugin. Right? So cross-origin resource sharing, which enables, as it suggests, resource sharing between the primary domain and the subdomain, so that there's no browser issues or warnings and so forth. All right, so first off, we go to GraphQL settings. We enable this first option. The next option is the URL for the front end. All right, so in this case, it will be my test domain here. We need to set some access control options for the headers. All right, so that when a user is transitioning from the front end to checkout and back, that the cookies and the WooCommerce session are carried across. We need to send site credentials, and we set this to LAX, LAX. And the last thing we need to do here is we specify our cookie domain. Right? So this is the actual the cookies being created on the front end, and the back end share this cookie domain. Right? So that's it for this option here. We say save it. Now there's nothing further to do in terms of configuring GraphQL. Look, on the subject of GraphQL, I'll mention one thing. When we first built the WooCommerce platform and launched our first project on it, it was using GraphQL to query products, to query categories, and so forth. And every time we deployed that site, which had about 500 products, the load that would be placed on that GraphQL endpoint would be so substantial that it would crash the WordPress instance. And it would basically, for 10 minutes, stop responding. Which, on a production WooCommerce instance, you just don't want that. So we decided to, because we were already putting a whole lot of product and category information, taxonomy information into Typesense, we decided to modify those indexes to include extra information in there, so that when we're deploying the front end, it uses Typesense to query and build that front end. And we found that as a result, the deployment took a far less amount of time because it wasn't relying on GraphQL to respond. The Typesense instance responds in about 20 milliseconds. It's so fast. And the other thing we found is that there was zero load on the back end every time you deployed the front end. Right? So that was a sort of like a win-win. All right, the next thing we need to do is install the WooCommerce plugin. All right, so we're going to add new. And to access that, to access all of these plugins here, they've got links here to the repos and the download links and all that sort of thing. So that's all there. WooCommerce plugin. So we click download. All right, so that's downloaded a zip file to my local, and I will now go and upload that. Now, it won't activate if the dependent plugins are not also active, right? So there'll be a warning message that pops up just saying, hey, you got to activate these other plugins. But so now the Blaze Commerce plugin is active. I can go to configure that. Right? And there's a couple of things we're going to do here. The API key for the admin API key, right, for Typesense needs to be added here. So we're going to check enable this system. We're going to put the API key here, the node or the URL that Typesense is active on, and well, something's gone wrong there. There we go. Store ID, which is always one in this demo, and the shop URL. Right? So this is just the front end URL that you're going to be using for Headless. And when I save this, I know it's successful because I've got some other options showing here. But if for any reason that validation failed, you would get an error message. All right, so there's a couple of things that I want to just quickly, I need to configure. I need to set the regional settings. This is for multi-currency because our platform supports multi-currency and multi-region. But I need to set this anyway, even though this is a single currency instance that I'm deploying. We'll fix this in a future release so that you don't need to set it for single currency, but for today, we do. The other thing I want to do is set a couple of filters. All right, so on the front end, when you're in a category, I want to be able to filter to show new products. We're going to give that a title of new, and we're going to we want to filter on save products, and there's a glitch in our this UI, which we'll fix up. And the other one we want is availability, all right, to show in stock and out of stock, and we'll just put availability there. All right, so we're going to save that. And we go back to our general settings now. And basically, once we've configured Typesense and also configured the regional settings, then we just need to sync that data to Typesense. And that's as simple as hitting the sync all option. And we can see that now that's going to take maybe a minute to sync all the product information, the taxonomies, menus, pages, and the site information, general site information. While that's happening, we'll move forward with the next steps. All right, so we're going to skip the Blaze, installing or running Blaze Commerce locally, but there is something that's quite important that is needed for the next stage anyway. These are what we call the environmental variables that are required to deploy Blaze Commerce as a Next.js headless application. So you need to copy these into a notepad and basically update each one of these variables based on the instructions here. Right? Now I've got that done already in Notepad. Right? So my primary domain, my subdomains, the Typesense API keys and so forth. So we need that in the next step. Right? So, right, running Blaze Commerce on Vercel. Right? So I've got a free account already set up here. Basically, it's ready to import its first project. In order to do that, we go to the Blaze Commerce headless repository. All right, so it's already attempting to fork it, and I'm forking it to my personal GitHub account. So I hit create fork, and that'll only take a moment. While that's happening, we go back to Blaze Commerce. All right, so we can see that the products, roughly 2,000 products. We've only got 200 products, roughly 200 products on this in WooCommerce here, but there's a lot of variables. A lot of those products have variants. So when it's synced, it's about 2,000. Took about 45 seconds to do that. All right, so now we've got our fork. The next thing we need to do, if we're following our guide, is deploy it with Vercel. So I'm going to go into Vercel. I'm going to import a project. And because this Vercel account is already linked to my GitHub account, then it's detecting that forked repository immediately. So I'll click import. This is where we use those environmental variables that I mentioned before. Right? So I'm going to go and copy those out of my text file here. And we just paste them straight in, all right? And it'll automatically create new lines. We don't have to do each one individually. And then it's a matter of hitting deploy. Now this is going to take about 5 minutes to deploy. So I'm going to pause the video now and then come back as the build is finishing. And we've got one more step to complete before we can view the site. Okay, so we're about 4.5 minutes into the deployment. And the reason why it takes about 5 minutes to deploy the headless front end is that you can see here on the screen here, it's generating static pages. Right? So every product page, every category page, homepage and so forth are all being pre-built as static pages. And when it's deployed, they're pushed out to the edge to 90 points of presence around the globe. That is how we achieve such blazing performance with Headless WooCommerce, because it's all pre-built. Those pages are super lightweight and they're sitting there at the edge, ready to access at any time. Right? So as someone moves around the site, they land on the homepage, they go to a category page, they go to a product page, they just load instantly because the site is basically statically generated there and done in a way that it's still fully functional using JavaScript. All right, so we're almost there. I'll pause it again now, and then I'll come back when the deployment is complete. Okay, so we're just at the tail end of the deployment now. And the last thing that we need to do, if we go back to our quick start guide, is add our front-end domain to Vercel. Right? So Vercel is deploying this on a on their domain, right? So their own domain. But if we go to settings for this project, that's strange. There we go. And we go to domains. I've already configured this domain to point to Vercel, right? So it adds it in an instant, right? Done. If you're adding, the first time you're adding a domain to Vercel, you'll have to update DNS, and it will generate an SSL cert as part of validating it. So we're ready to view the site. All right, now, there's not much to see here. This is a sort of a generic homepage that we create automatically when BlazeCommerce is installed. It's using Gutenberg blocks. So you can configure this as you would a normal Gutenberg blocks page and display it. The important thing here, a couple of things. The search, for example, is instant. If I am searching on hoodies, for example, it's got products that match my search description. It's also got categories that match. So if I go through to hoodies, bang, there's a couple there. If I go to the shop page, there's 170 products on here, and I can sort this price low to high, and you can see that that's instant, right? That took less than half a second to update. And if I switch that sort order to high, from high to low, it does exactly the same thing. If I filter this and I say I want to only see, well, everything's going to be new, right? Because I just created this site. But if I wanted to see only products that were on sale, for example, instantly updates to show those 6. And then I can click through to a product page. And I can add that to the cart. And there's my mini cart. It's got the ability to input coupon codes right here in the mini cart as well. And when I go through to the checkout, it's going to take me to the checkout, which again doesn't look pretty. Right? It's a bit of a mess, I'll admit. But now we're on WordPress WooCommerce. So that's it. Deploying your Headless WooCommerce instance using Blaze Commerce in about 15 minutes. Now, of course, there's quite a bit of work to make this look good, but the purpose of this demonstration is to just show the performance of it and the features and functionality of it. And the next stage would be to theme it to match your particular project. If you've got any questions about Blaze Commerce or the quick start guide or anything to do with what we're doing here, or you need some help with getting started, we've got a Slack channel for our community. So we encourage you to drop by and ask any questions you have, and look forward to chatting with you then. Thank you.